Howdy, hello, H2Os, Roller Bros, and Chrissy Fox does stuffs alike. I'm your guide, Q, and welcome back to a single nice girl story. This one is extremely interesting because it comes from the perspective of a nice girl. I always enjoy seeing that sort of stuff because I was a nice guy myself, and so it's cool to relate to these people and figure out why we all were the way that they were. This person's origin story is very much different than mine, which makes it even more interesting to me. Let's get into it. This one comes from an anonymous subscriber. Hi Q, love your videos, thank you very much for that. I'd like to remain anonymous for this one, mainly because I have no clue if someone I know might recognize the story, so I'd like some plausible deniability. So, as the subject line says, I was a nice girl for years. There was a guy, let's call him K. K was really great, we had a lot in common. I was a very shy kid, still am, so I welcomed any attention I got, and he gave me quite a lot of it. We became friends pretty quickly and talked very often. At some point in middle school, he revealed that he had a crush on me. He was a very sweet guy, and we could talk for hours, so in theory, a relationship would work. Besides, it was just middle school. The expectations for a relationship wouldn't exactly be high. The only issue is, I was a lesbian. At that point, I was deeply in denial about my orientation, so I agreed to be his girlfriend. Shortly after, Kay moved, so I was somewhat relieved I wouldn't have to show any affection in public. We kept up a text relationship. Now, here's where the nice girl stuff comes in. I didn't know what it was about the relationship, but it felt very wrong. Now, I could have just broken up with him. Instead, I decided to become the worst girlfriend ever. I'd text him constantly, telling him that if he didn't wake up and text me back, I'd break up with him. I'd tell him he didn't care about me if he didn't answer my texts within minutes. I'd accuse him of texting other girls, all while reminding him that I was the best girl ever and that none of the other girls at his school would ever be as good as me. As soon as he'd respond, I'd immediately follow it up by apologizing and telling him that I'm usually very sweet and that I was just a little insecure. I'd blame him for my awful behavior while apologizing profusely. I thought that if I could get him to break up with me, this entire situation would just disappear and I could go back to not thinking about boys and why I wasn't really into them. I did this for years, until around 9th grade. That was about 2 years of me berating him daily, calling him awful names, and reminding him that I was the best girlfriend ever. Everything really shifted once I got into 9th grade. At that point, I was pretty sure I liked girls, even though I refused to admit that I only liked girls. 9th grade was also the point in which our conversations got less advertiser-friendly, let's say. I really like that wording. My discomfort with the relationship grew more and more each day. So I amped the nice girl act up. I'd text him at 3 a.m. knowing he was asleep and couldn't respond, accusing him of cheating and not being attracted to me. Basically holding his attraction to me over his head until he'd get up and give me attention. I'd get really intense with discussions about physical things, hoping I'd be coming on too strong and that he'd end things. He never did though. This continued for another year. The following year was literally the worst year of my life for many reasons. I wanted the relationship to end, but I wanted him to end it. I got even worse in our conversations. At multiple points I threatened to cheat on him with one of his friends if he didn't wake up and talk to me, because how dare he let a nice gal like me stay up alone with no one to talk to? There's a lot wrong with that, obviously, and while I never actually did that, I'd been threatening him with these awful things for so long it became second nature. Get home, do my homework, text him an ungodly number of times, be sad, text him something awful to make him hate me, go to bed. My mental health was pretty awful around that point. I was more depressed than I'd ever been. I'd been thinking about suicide. This is somewhat of a tangent, but I think it gives context. I'm from a traditional Caribbean family, and my parents immigrated from a country where homosexuality is still criminalized, and there's a popular song that's literally just about shooting gay men because they're gross. I wasn't just nervous about coming out, I was terrified of even being gay in secret. I'd only come out to 2 close friends and a teacher. I broke down in their room during lunch. At that point, and more than anything, I just wanted to be straight. Even looking at girls in the eye for more than a couple seconds made me become overwhelmed with shame and disgust with myself. So it's safe to say I wasn't exactly stable. I was reclusive and he was one of the few people I communicated with. I got even more intense with Kay. our conversations grew a lot more inappropriate. It was more than just me trying to get him to break up with me, it was my way of punishing myself. Anytime I thought about a pretty girl I'd see in class, I'd immediately go text him something he probably wasn't in the mood to hear. I'd use it like armor. See, I couldn't be gay if I'm talking like this with a guy. I'd act like I was constantly trying to get into his pants and then get angry with him when he wasn't in the mood, calling him all sorts of awful things. I told him I was the only girl that would ever want him, and that I was so good to him all the time, even though most girls would have left him by now. At some point during that year, I just snapped and completely ghosted him. He tried to contact me through some friends, but I completely ignored him until senior year. Fast forward to now. I'm about to be a freshman in college, and I've talked to Kay about the whole situation. I've apologized profusely, and somehow he doesn't hate me. We're actually quite chill now. My mental health is also significantly better, which is something I'd never thought I'd be able to say. I don't think this story has a moral. More than anything, I'm just glad he doesn't hate me, because we really did make good friends. Thanks for reading this if you've gotten this far. I love your vids, and thank you for reading this long-ass email. Thank you for sending in the story. Stay hydrated. This story has, like, so many layers to it. I'm, like, trying to think of where to even start with my thoughts on the situation. First off, I'm just really glad that you had the guts to send in this story, because I think it's really important that we get the perspective of a person that does this sort of thing. Because normally, if we got the perspective of Kay, and he sent in this story telling me what you did to him, I'd be like, that is an awful person. Like, who would do that to somebody? That's fucking terrible. But with all this context, it doesn't make what you did any better, it just explains how somebody can get into this situation. And I'm not saying that you're a terrible person, you're just a young person that was dealing with a lot of stuff at this time, and you picked a very, very bad coping mechanism, which is something that happens to all of us, and the sad thing is sometimes it affects other people very negatively. But youth is weird like that sometimes. Like, some things in your youth can affect you for the rest of your life and kind of mess you up, and then other things you can kind of just brush off after a couple years and be like, okay, I mean, that's a thing that happened, but it's not that big of a deal, just like Kay did with being able to kind of forgive you for what you did, you know? And if there's anything we can take away from this story, I think there are two big things. One of them is knowing the value of ending a relationship and getting out of it, knowing that if you're uncomfortable in a relationship and if you don't want to be in it, you're not doing the other person any favors by staying with them, specifically from Kay's perspective in this situation, and from your perspective. If you could have cut it off much more cleanly than this, it would have been great. And I think the number two important thing to take away from this story is how important schools and towns having LGBT resources is, because, like, as much as people want to think that we're past all of these problems in 2019, we obviously still have people that are ashamed of themselves because of the way they were brought up, or just the way that they feel inside, that if they had more people to connect with who have gone through the same thing, it could be really powerful for them. So please, if you have any strategies for how to end a relationship or a friendship in the best way possible, please leave them in the comments. Also, if you have any strategies of how to, like, accept yourself, or any resources that might help somebody that's going through some sort of, like, you know, LGBT existential crisis or something like that, that would be extremely valuable. I'll try and, like, approve comments that have links in them are going to be put in the spam filter. I don't have any control over that, but I'll try to approve as many as possible, so feel free to leave a link to a website or anything like that, or just some tips and advice. Skate on to the best of your abilities, guys. Hope you're all doing well out there, and staying safe, taking care of your fellow human beings. You drink more water, skate on to the best of your abilities, and I'll see you very soon.